Welcome back to another episode of Tech Beyond Gender podcast, where we amplify voices driving change in the tech industry. Today, I'm joined by an inspiring leader with nearly 3 decades of experience in engineering, Rachel Collingridge. From shaping high performing teams to championing inclusive leadership, Rachel believes that thriving engineers, delighted customers, and successful businesses go hand in hand. Beyond tech, she's a trail runner, a passionate musician, and a believer in lifelong learning. Join us as we dive into her journey, leadership, philosophy, and the future of engineering. Thanks for joining us, Rachel. So excited to have you here.
Well, thanks very much for having me, and it's pretty lovely to hear that person you just described in that intro. So thanks for putting those words together, and I do definitely recognise myself in that.
Beautiful. So, Rachel, before we dive into your incredible journey in technology, let's take a step back and get to know the person behind this leader. Can you tell us about your childhood, early experiences? What were the key influences? It could be either people, events, or interests that shaped you into the person and leader you are today.
It was really music that I loved. It's what I did a lot of. Therefore, it's something that I became good at, and really that was a sole focus for me. And as a clarinet player and a saxophone player and teacher, I went to university to do that and study classical clarinet training. So I guess for that, I really followed my interests. And that's going to sound a bit interesting, considering we're here to talk about engineering leadership. My computing as a child, like this, I'm a child of the 80s. So there was a ZX Spectrum at home, like with the little rubbery keys, and I would like code from magazines or work out how to use the beep function, which would give me some one line of music. I wasn't a huge creator on the computer, but I did like solving puzzles with it, with a task I wanted to do. How did I do it? But in terms of schooling and stuff, computers weren't really around much at that time. Obviously, there was no internet available to the general public. So I think I just became a follower of opportunities, having done my music degree, having moved to the UK, which was where my parents are from. Opportunities presented themselves, not in music, but to move into software development. And I was sort of curious, and I like following a path that opens up like that. And so that's what I did. And really what it came down to with key influences is the really kind people I met, the people who encouraged me to do something different, who supported me and all my questions that I had as I learnt on the job how to be a software developer. So I think really that's what's happened in my career. I've looked for great people to work with, those people who seem smart, clever, and kind, because they bring people along with them. And I've followed that. Yeah.
From being a creative musician to using the more intellectual side of your brain, right? From your right brain to your left brain. How was that transition for you?
I do have a theory about music because as a classical musician, I am really translating the sheet music on the page, playing something as Mozart might have wanted, or Beethoven, or Weber, or whomever. And so it's not a jazz creativity, a sort of framework to then really improvise. So I think it sits somewhere in the middle. It has got that intellectual capacity of needing to read and translate what you see on the page. It's a
Mhm.
sort of code. I guess many people would find it an impenetrable code to try and read sheet music. So it sits somewhere in the middle of intelligence and sort of that creativity. Not that they're, of course, mutually exclusive, but yeah, I think that's my description as a classical musician.
Wow, nice. So for your first job in tech was about what, 30 years ago?
That is true. Yes, about 28 years ago, but let's round that up to 30.
Yeah. Now, can you take us through your career journey and some pivotal moments that shaped your leadership style?
Just getting into tech in the first place was a big deal, but that was the right time coming up to the year 2000, the right place because of real opportunities, and then recognizing actually I was the right person to, keen learner, really curious, logical brain that's suited. So, like I say, real opportunity. Back in those days, we were called programmers, and I went programmer to senior programmer. Then there was a change to developer, that move away from you're just isolated in your box writing code, and it all comes together seamlessly at the end. Of course, we know that it never came together seamlessly at the end. And when you're writing something in your lane and hoping it works with everyone else's, that's not a great way to do software. But that was how things were generally done at the time. Moved into team leadership, and then development manager, and head of engineering, and VP of engineering. So all of these titles are ones that I've moved through on the way. I think the pivotal, I resisted being any sort of leader in tech for quite a long time because of what I thought it meant and what I'd seen a lot of. And those things were that you needed to be the best technical person on your team. I was pretty good. I'd seen a lot of stuff, but I wasn't a career technologist, like side hustle. It's all I do at home as well. That's not me. So I was never like the sharpest technical person in a team. Also, I'd seen a lot of sort of command and control, also, or some command and control type leadership styles. That's not me either. I really like working in the team and all bringing us along together. So as the industry changed to be more collaborative, to be much more of a servant leadership, like leading as a real person, a human with empathy and humility, that's when I realized that might be something that I do. So there was a job that I went to in 2014 in New Zealand at PowerShop, and that's where I really saw that type of leadership actually in practice. And that's where, I moved from being someone on the code to being someone that worked with people in the code as a leader.
Yeah, when you mentioned about how even in your technical roles, it was not your side hustle and you didn't think that you were not that sharp. It just reminds me of something that I've read in the past about how women prefer to know every single detail. If not, they're like, no, I don't know this well. But whereas with men, someone with the same knowledge as you might actually say, well, I was very good. I really knew what I did.
Yeah, I am here, and it's that I've heard that set of roles as well. When people are thinking of going for interviews, men will often go, "Hooray, I know 60% of it," and women will often go, "Oh no, I couldn't interview because I only know 40% of this role, or I'm missing 40% is what they'd see." So yeah, you might be right, and also it goes beyond the technical, the important bits of being a technical leader. You want to optimize for the people side of the equation and the collaborative side, not just the tech. I think you end up with a much better result and in a much better place if you balance out those two capabilities.
Hmm. So, what keeps you motivated in the space of engineering leadership?
Oh, I think it's a lot of who rather than the what, like the people that I see around me. When I think about my motivation for, am I doing the right thing? Am I making a difference? Like the feedback I get from people and the way that I enjoy networking with others in the industry to find out what they're doing and compare and contrast. So I think it's about that community, being part of community. So I think that really motivates me. The technology doesn't stay still, and business doesn't stay still. Management styles don't either. So there's always more to learn and experiment with. And so I find that really motivating as well.
And what does effective leadership look like in technical teams when you're managing principal engineers, engineering managers, and then?
Well, I would say the most important thing in business in general is just clarity of expectations. So the who and the how and the what of what needs to be done, to be clear on that. And then the people that you have working with you know what is expected, what to be doing next. So I think clarity of expectations is really important. I really like the idea of, well, we have a principle here called start with success, and it's a sort of outcome-led approach. Like where do we want to be, and how do we work back from that? And I think, again, that builds into that clarity of expectations. So for me, I think that's what effective leadership really looks like. What are we trying to do together? And just keep clarifying it. If it's not clear, let's go again. I think there's also providing a forum or a space for people to communicate together, to discover together, to solve problems together. So sometimes it's simply as providing that meeting, that Miro board that comes with it to sort of describe the problem and then just get people talking. So yeah, describing that space, I think. I think also there's an element of everyone just being able to try and fail and try again. I think that's what effective leadership looks like. As a leader, I'm doing that myself. I have a quote. Anyone who's worked with me in the last few years will go, here it comes. If you're not winning, you're learning. And I think that effective leadership means just exemplifying that, role modeling it. You need to walk the talk. And I think one thing as well, I consider myself post-technical now. Like I say, I'm not in there writing the code myself. And certainly once I'd moved from a company where I'd contributed the code base, like the last few companies I've worked at, I've never written a line of code there. I've moved away from it. But there's definitely a responsibility to keep up with the new paradigms that are out there, even if it's at a surface level. And so there's definitely, I think that's part of it, being able to talk with people about what they're doing effectively.
Now, since the 90s, when you started working in the tech industry, to date, what changes have you seen with respect to gender diversity and inclusion in the industry?
Yeah, it's up and down. I feel that I have worked in places which have had quite a few women or not men, diverse genders in, but it goes up and down. It depends. It's not uniformly moving up to be more inclusive across the board. For me, the majority of places I've worked in have been very human-centric, and I think that's really important. If you're human-centric first, like the diversity and acceptance and inclusion really follows next. What I will say is, though, there's definitely less of the programmer culture, which I think is great. It's definitely less about the craft beer and the working all hours. That's a real change in culture. I think for myself, when I started out to be a woman in tech, there was an idea that you needed to be more like the men in tech. So, hey, women, don't use emoji, don't use exclamation marks, all of these sort of things that's been just disproven. You can be who you are. It's just let's widen the lens of what an effective leader looks like in tech. And so I've definitely seen a change there. I think there's definitely more information around how diverse teams make better software. So more information is excellent. There is certainly more striving in some areas to have metrics around how they're improving diversity. I like that, but I wouldn't like people to just be improving diversity to make their metrics look good. I want them to deeply believe that it will make their software, their product better for the wider world. So not just pay lip service, but really internalize that. And I think I'll sort of finish up that question there with a couple of things that I wonder. I do wonder sometimes if people who aren't a minority in tech, like myself as a woman, recognize their privilege, because there is a real privilege. This idea that someone just needs to be good for the job. When you're looking at jobs through quite a focused lens of everything you've seen before, which might only be men in that job, then you're really cutting yourself off from who else might be there. So good enough for the job needs a lot of looking at. What do you mean by that? So yeah, that's something that I would like to see change, recognition of that privilege and a wider mindset. Oh, actually, I've got one more thing that comes to mind. A fantastic mentor and friend said once to me that she would love to see more average women in leadership, which sounds a bit strange on the surface of it, but we don't want the women that we see in leadership to be the excellent. Like, you've got to be so excellent. That's the only way as a woman you get there. I've got to say, there's lots of average men leaders, so could we see some average women leaders as well? I hope that makes sense, but it just means that I think we've truly made advances there where you don't have to be the top 1% to get there. You can be, somewhere else on that field.
Yeah, yeah. So that's quite interesting, right? What you mentioned, because there was another research that I had read as well in the past where like women to be successful even in technical roles, they need to demonstrate pro-social skills. Whereas when it comes to men, they don't really need to even display any pro-social skills. They'll just be considered as a geek or a nerd, and that's the way they behave because they're in technology sector. But the standards become quite different when it comes to women. And I can imagine that will be the same when it comes to leadership roles as well, right? So you need to be exceptionally good to be able to get to that state. As you said, not we don't really see many average women. Like the women I've seen in leadership roles have been exceptionally good. And a couple of days back, when I was talking to one female leader, she mentioned to me how, like, she's been in leadership roles for at least a couple of decades in technology, and she was saying that how she really tries to play it down. She's very careful with the tone and everything because being assertive can be judged as being aggressive when it comes from her. But when it comes from a male, they just say, okay, he's displaying excellent leadership skills.
Absolutely. I think there's examples of that with children, aren't there? Like a female, a young girl will be described as bossy if she's leading the group of children, whereas for a young boy, that might be seen as leadership. So yeah, it goes all the way through. And I think that's what I mean by just always looking at our privilege. And I am a woman in tech, and I've been learning a lot how this looks like. Like I say, I was trying to act more like a man in tech to start with. And I've really changed my view on that. It's a wider field. Yeah.
Yeah, like as you said, I feel at times, like even being an architect, I just do feel that at times it's easier to play or try and imitate how a man would behave in certain situations than actually be more authentic to my own behavior. I feel it is easier to do that because there's a little bit more acceptance than just be a woman.
I think that the joy of getting older, and sometimes it doesn't feel like there's very many of those, but a joy of being older is just that confidence in who you are and actually being able to lean into that a lot more. And yeah, I'm really finding that that's a change for me now. I can put the emojis and the exclamation marks or whatever I was told that I shouldn't do back in the day, and just enjoy more being who I am and that being effective, maybe in a different way that's been seen before, but it's effective, and so that's great.
Yeah. So now, what are some of the biggest barriers that women and underrepresented groups still face in tech?
Obviously, I'm going to speak in generalities because it won't be everyone, but I think a lot of time it will be women who end up doing a lot of the glue work in a team. Teamwork's really important. Teams do need to be administered and facilitated, and those ceremonies that we do in software development need a driving force through them. So often that's women, and then that can take away from improving your technical skills, and then you might not get the promotion that you expect, because it's actually oftentimes only technical skills that are looked at. I think that is changing over time, but that I think is a barrier. Just doing the glue work because it's needed and it's important, then it's not recognised it's important, and so you may have been sort of knocked back on a promotion because of that. There's a woman who's called Susan Collin Tuono. She has got a TED talk which is called The Missing 33%, and it's about how women are great at unlocking the greatness in themselves and others, but the sort of business and commercial aspects of a business aren't always as something that comes up in conversation with women as they're being mentored or led themselves. So therefore, there's this whole sort of part of the industry, the commercials of what a business does, really important, but a lot of women just won't have the context of that. That's not been a focus for their learning and for how others have taught them. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And I think, look, if we have more women around leadership positions, you can be what you can see. And so let's do more of that. That's a barrier. If you can't see people there, then it's harder to do. So more people who can break through that glass ceiling and allow minorities to be that person. You can be what you can see.
Mhm.
And I think, well, there is a little bit, again, a generalizing here a little bit, but often women do still have quite a burden of responsibility at home, and that can lead to burnout if they're balancing high responsibilities at home with work. I still think that's the case. So that is something to look out for, and can be a barrier.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So now, have you had mentors in your career?
Yes, I have. I think they're really important. I'll tell you a story about the first person who I really considered an official, formal mentor. And I was going for a role and I wanted some advice from someone who was sitting in an executive position. So I contacted her, set up a meeting. That was great. I turned up thinking, great, she's going to tell me what to do. And that is not how a mentor and mentee relationship works. And so I've learned a lot since then, in the last, I know that was probably a decade or so ago. Um, I think that you need to have a really clear idea what you want from a mentor relationship. So a clear idea of where you want to go. And I think that's really important to get you where you want to go. Something I really promote is a model by Lara Hogan, and it's called Build a Manager Voltron. So when I think about the people who I am informed by, it's about looking at what they do, which I really like, but building something that works for me. It's sort of like one of those bingo sheets where you've got communication style. You might admire one person. They might be a friend. They might be someone you've seen on a TED Talk. It could be other aspects of leadership as well. This concept's also called building your own board of directors. So I think that's a really effective way to be mentored. It's not to find the one person who tells you everything you think you need to do. It's to look out in for your network, your friends, your ex-colleagues, and those professionals out there, the TED Talks, and build that up. I think you have a formal mentorship path, like I say, you really want to be quite precise about what you want to get out of it. So that's good for that sort of short term, like lift you up. It's the promotion. It's sort of get the new job. It's like get out of a rut. But those informal networks you build, for me, it's like a lot of coffee catch-ups with people I've worked at. Those are the people that mentor me. That's the day-to-day important stuff that you keep just by simple fact of doing it day to day. Those are the really strong things that you build a muscle to do your job. So those sort of relationships are important for me too.
See, I have not had a mentor. So I actually struggle to understand. Like, okay, so I understand that you might go to a mentor if you want any ideas with regards to your career advancement opportunities, or you also mentioned that you need to be very clear in your mind as to what you want to achieve in that relationship. So I was just thinking, if I'm really clear about what I want to achieve in my career, for instance, then there is no need to have a mentor, right? Like, how does it work?
I think it's a bit like having a therapist or a coach. You know where you want to go, but you might just need someone to talk to about that, to crystallize your ideas. You will always be thinking within your own sort of blinkered, your own experiences. So talking to that mentor, that coach, that therapist is a person that can give you a wider insight or a different view on something you've already been looking at. So I think that's the power. It's taking someone else's experience,
Mhm.
so you can sort of, you can multiply on that. You've got your own experience to learn from, but now you've got someone else's experience too. So yeah, and I think those alternative point of views are really helpful.
Yeah, I've often seen all these female leaders being extremely busy, And as you said, a lot of women have multiple roles to play, and they're juggling a lot of personal responsibilities as well. It could be like having young children or teenage children, or parents who are getting older. It could be any responsibility, right? Like caregiving responsibility or whatever it could be. And do you think there are still many women in leadership roles who are actually keen to be mentors? Um, like it requires a lot of dedication from the mentor side as well, right?
It does, and the burden of making change sometimes falls on those, often falls on those people who actually want to see the change. I mean, when you look at people driving diversity programs at companies, it will be those people who are probably affected by it, right? And then they've got the burden, extra burden of doing that work. So I do agree. I always believe that you need to be looking after yourself first. If you don't put on your own oxygen mask, then you're not really good to yourself or to anybody else. So that's important to do. I think with mentorship roles, when I talk about clarity of expectations, it's not even just what you as a mentee want to get out of it. It's just having it set up. Like, is this a half-hour conversation once a week for 6 weeks to discuss a particular topic? Let's put some real boundaries around it. And it means it's not stretching off indefinitely into the future. It's actually something that you've time boxed and there's a goal behind it. And so you've made a project and, tick and it's done. So it doesn't need to be years long, hours a week. It can be smaller than that. So yeah, frame it up for something that works to you. I think the last thing I'd say about mentorship programs is that, well, I say programs, so you can be part of a program. I'm just commencing with one at the moment with a Tech Waka podcast. And people who organize those programs put together some really nice information about how to approach that. So that takes some of the load off. If you're thinking, how do I be a mentor? You've actually got some of that great material. So being part of a program can be really helpful.
So, what advice would you give to women in their mid-career who would want to move into leadership roles?
I think build a strong idea of why you want to do that. I'm quoting a bit of Simon Sinek, find your why first, because that will carry you through. Make that list. I talked about Lara Hogan's Build Your Manager Voltron. List who you know who might help you so that I think if there's gaps in your network to actually make that move, like build some connections. If you've got the time to attend a meetup or be part of a Slack workspace that's built around leadership, then I think that can be really helpful as well, because it's making those connections and listening to that other experiences that can be great. We've talked quite a lot about mentorship, so that will be in there as well for moving forward. And I think that wherever you are in your journey, you've always learned something. So you've always got something to teach someone else. So let that ladder down behind you. So yeah, I think really building that community and bringing others into it's really important.
Great. You also mentioned that leadership is underpinned by learning, sharing, reaching out, and listening to others, right, in your LinkedIn profile. Now, can you share an example of when this approach made a real impact?
All of these things are something that I do sort of every day, I would say. And so when you were talking about this question, asking me this question, I was like, oh, I don't know, real impact. Sometimes impact is a bit like a tsunami. It's not I don't know, 50-foot wave. It's actually that like continual force and pressure over time. I know tsunami is not the best metaphor there, but it's what you do every day that counts. So when I think specifically of reaching out early in my career, like I didn't know how to write SQL queries. I came back from a Visual Basic course. I knew how to draw grey boxes on a screen for desktop applications. Someone wanted me to do something in databases, no idea. And so in terms of reaching out and learning, I just had to make connections and ask people because I didn't know how to write a SQL query. Didn't know anything about it at all. Funnily enough, that's something I still think is valuable to know how to do in the technical industry. Doesn't matter how far it's moved on. But I hope that the things that I've done which make an impact, and sometimes you don't know for a while, but it's the building a community of practice, pulling together the meeting which brings people together. Maybe it's talking at an event about things like imposter syndrome or getting older in tech and these topics that are dear to my heart. I think that reaching out and trying to teach others and learn while you're doing it is really important. Camille Fournier, in one of her books, says that as a leader, you often need to allow yourself to generously speculate that you're making a difference because you don't see that change like you might when you fix the SQL query and you see the results you want. It actually takes quite a bit of time. Yeah.
Yeah. What are the biggest myths or misconceptions about engineering leadership that you'd like to talk about?
I think I've named one of them already, which is you don't need to be the technical expert to lead people through technical problems. My phrase about this would be, is it that technology that's letting us down here and making things hard? Or is it actually the people around the technology that just need some support to ask the right questions to have a different approach? So I think as leaders, I find when we're software developers, we work in teams, and teamwork is really important. We have agile ceremonies. We talk about giving each other feedback. We're in quite close contact and collaboration. I think that's really important in leadership as well. I think leadership teams need to be teams. I think they should meet. I think that's the most important thing that they can do in the week. And it's not an update time. Updates can be done asynchronously. It's meeting as leaders to go, what's the most important thing that we can do as some people who've got some influence and a platform in this company? So I would advise anyone moving into leadership to build their leadership team with their peers, with their boss, and make that really effective. You shouldn't just be a leader working in a silo on your software delivery team. You should be working as part of a team yourself.
How do you handle failures or setbacks, both personally and as a leader?
I think in both instances, like I'm quite a public person, so I just publicly admit that something hasn't gone to plan. Um, Failing is always difficult, but
Mhm.
like I say, I've got my quote of if you're not winning, you're learning, and I do believe that. Sometimes I need to say it to myself a few times. I like the idea of writing things down, like that journaling aspect. Things didn't go to plan. I'm not feeling very good. What happened? Pull it apart a bit. I know in software engineering, we've moved from using the term post-mortem, like really pulling something apart in a gruesome way, much more to lessons learned. And I think that applies personally and in a team environment as well. Yeah, I think, the movie, I've got to remember what it's called. There's a movie called Everything Everywhere All at Once, something like that. It's about multiverses and the idea that you could move down path A or path B or path C, and from there you can jump. So it's like a fractal. Your life could be a fractal experience. But you know what? You've taken a path. You need to follow that path and be positive, I think, about your path and where you go next. So I think that positive mindset is really important as well in handling failure. I am where I am. Where can I go next? So it's not what went wrong that's the problem. It's what you do next that matters.
Mhm. So you have been in technical roles and then you moved into leadership roles. And most people who are in technical roles, they have this certain specific characteristics, right? Like they can be quite more hands-on, who are like not socially that they're not really socially extroverts, they're more of introverts. Do you believe in those characteristics of how typically we think of as people who are technically inclined? Do you believe in those characteristics?
To some extent, I think, and I know I hear a lot of people talking about that in technology. It applies to many other industries as well. music. I mean, music is a place where you need to go and sit in your own room and practice for a really long time so you can be introverted. Understanding that introversion is about how you regain your energy was quite a game changer for me. Because I would have self-described as an extrovert, someone who talks a lot, but actually I do get energy from social interactions. And most importantly, now I realize that I also gain energy from being by myself. So that was a moment of self-realization. So I somewhat believe in those. It's not confined to technology. And I think if you understand yourself well
Mhm.
and you want to be slightly different, it might not be your natural tendency to be collaborative or communicative, but those are important. So you might just need to have a little conversation with yourself or talk to your coach about how to do a bit more of that, because those skills are important, even if they don't come, naturally to you.
So, as an engineering leader, how can you create that psychologically safe space for engineers to thrive?
I talked about clarity of communication before, and I think that's important because if you can be clear in expectations, people aren't left hanging or second guessing. They know what the mission is, and they can get on board with that. So if you set out some expectations or intentions, help people with time boxes, even if you're putting something, say, in Slack, like, why have you put it there? You don't want people to be second guessing. Should I be doing something? I don't know. Make it really clear. I use FYI a lot. This is just for your information. You don't have to act. So help people there. And I think that can help create a safe space. We talked about introversion and extroversion. So getting to know people and their working styles is important, because you can probably assume that on any team, you've got someone who's going to thrive by talking out loud, uh, but someone who will also thrive by going away and thinking about it and coming back later, or who might need material in front, or they might prefer written or verbal or sort of a diagram communication. So there's going to be quite a wide range of what's effective. And I think if you can come to the party on that, people can feel safe in the environment because that they know that their way of learning and communicating can be catered for and their voice will be heard.
Nice. What are some of the emerging trends in engineering leadership that excites you the most?
I think servant leadership servant leadership isn't an emerging trend, but I think it's still an important one. Leading with empathy, humility, and having that commitment to helping others. So I want that to be an enduring trend, even if it's not an emerging one. I see a lot about productivity, and I think that excites me when I think about it from an engineering point of view, where productivity is removing friction for engineers. It's not, hey, can we do things faster and less well? So how can we do things well and remove friction in the path of your job? So that's the exciting part of productivity for me. And with DORA metrics and space metrics and DevX metrics and Core 4 and a whole range of things that I'm seeing out there in the industry, I'm interested in those, but what I want to see is under the hood. What are those technical and sort of behavioural aspects that make engineers' life easier, remove friction? So productivity, but in a nice way. And lastly, I can't be in technology and not mention our friend AI. And I think there are many people at the bleeding edge of AI. That is not me, but I know that that's important. My usage is daily of AI, not in a particularly mature way, but I want to keep tabs on that. The thing I really think about a lot is responsible usage, both for the world and climate change. Like, there are some servers running overtime to provide us with these answers. But, can we use it to add value to people's lives? It would be great if, like in a DevOps principle, let's remove those small tasks or those repeated tasks and automate them so that we can add more value in our jobs as knowledge workers. So yeah, let's use it responsibly, both for the planet and for our own brains. I think responsible AI usage looks like intentional usage. Why are we using it? We still need to be able to engage our brains and use critical thinking in order for AI to then make our lives a little bit easier and simpler and quicker. That's what I hope.
So, what skills should aspiring engineering leaders focus on developing to stay relevant in the ever-changing tech landscape?
I think that working on your human skills is never going to go out of fashion. I've said a lot about those, so I'll move on. I think we do need to keep up with what's happening in technology, but there's so many ways to keep up with things that I think we just all need to be discerning about our trusted sources of information. I've talked about expectations and goals quite a lot. If I'm really truly wanting to move on with my AI knowledge, I want to make that my learning tunnel for the moment and not have emails, newsletters, all of the blog posts and what have you coming at me in many, many topics. They all look interesting, but I try and keep a focus on what's important for me right now. So yeah, being discerning with your trusted sources of information. And I think, yeah, just connections, making connections with the people in your organization. I love having chats with engineers because they will tell me what they're doing today, how they're doing it, what they're doing it with. And as a leader, you should be doing that to keep you grounded. I'm a manager of managers, so I don't see what's happening in the code base at all unless I ask someone. And I really enjoy finding out from engineers what they're doing. So I think that's a skill to develop.
If you would give one piece of advice to your younger self when starting in tech, what would it be?
I think I would say to younger me, just to be kinder to myself. Perhaps spend a bit less time worrying about whether I was good enough to do something, and just use that energy to learn, keep learning, or to give more back. So I think that's it. Be kinder to myself.
Thank you so much. It was such a beautiful conversation. You were just so succinct to the point, and you had very, very clear messages for us. Now, what is one key takeaway you'd like our listeners to remember from this conversation?
Well, I think apart from being kinder to yourself, I think it is as much as you've got the energy and are able to lead into building and strengthening your communities around you and your networks. I think that is effort that brings you back success and value in multiplying ways. So lean into that.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel, for your time. It was such a pleasure to have you here. Enjoyed our conversation, and we look forward to having you again, maybe in future again.
I would love to be back here talking to you, Mina.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Rachel.